Imagine waking up and finding that the headlines are filled with one major story: Washington has decided to pause billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine. At first glance, you might think this is a foreign policy decision that has little to do with your life here at home. But look closer, and you'll realize that the ripple effects of this move could land right in your mailbox in the form of higher Medicare premiums. That's right. An international decision about aid and budgets overseas could translate into real financial pressure for seniors and families across America. This is not just politics as usual. It's about whether ordinary people will be able to keep up with rising healthcare costs in an already fragile economy. For years, U.S. support for Ukraine has been an essential part of foreign policy, framed as a defense of democracy and a check on Russian aggression. But this aid package comes at a cost. Every dollar sent abroad is a dollar accounted for in America's federal budget, which is already strained by debt, deficits, and rising interest rates. When lawmakers decided to pause the latest round of aid in 2025, they did so with one eye on the growing financial burden at home. Budget committees are scrambling to balance competing priorities, and programs like Medicare are caught in the middle. If revenue gaps widen and spending cuts are forced, Medicare premiums and out-of-pocket expenses could rise sharply. Now, let's put this into perspective. Medicare isn't just another government program. It's the backbone of healthcare for over 65 million Americans, most of them seniors living on fixed incomes. When Washington trims its budget or reallocates funds, Medicare is often one of the first places where the effects are felt. And because healthcare costs continue to climb faster than inflation, Medicare premiums are already projected to increase in 2025. Add in the budget gaps created by shifting or pausing foreign aid, and the math becomes even more painful for everyday Americans. Think about what this means for seniors. Imagine a retired couple living off Social Security and a modest savings account. They hear that aid to Ukraine has been paused, maybe even feeling some relief that money is staying in America. But then, when their new Medicare bill arrives, they see the premium has jumped higher than expected. The savings they thought they would keep never reach their pockets because the system is adjusting to cover budget shortfalls. That's the cruel irony of this situation. Even when foreign aid is scaled back, the gaps in funding don't disappear. They get shifted onto programs people rely on, like Medicare. This creates a dangerous balancing act. On one side, policymakers argue that supporting Ukraine is necessary to prevent greater instability in Europe, which could eventually cost the U.S. even more in defense spending. On the other side, critics argue that America cannot afford to bankroll foreign wars while seniors struggle to pay for prescription drugs and doctor visits. Both sides agree that Medicare is essential, but the question is who pays for it and how. Without a stable budget plan, the threat of higher premiums looms large, and it's seniors and working families who bear the brunt. The economic picture only complicates things further. Inflation, though somewhat cooled, is still keeping grocery prices and utility bills high. Gas prices remain volatile, and housing costs continue to rise in many parts of the country. For families already living paycheck to paycheck, the thought of higher Medicare deductions from their pay stubs or higher premiums in retirement is alarming. It's like running a race where the finish line keeps moving farther away. Every time Americans catch a break in one area, say a slight dip in grocery prices, another cost, like healthcare, shoots upward. Supporters of the aid pause argue that this is exactly why the U.S. needs to refocus spending domestically. They say halting billions in Ukraine funding could create breathing room in the budget, allowing more resources for Medicare, Social Security, and infrastructure. But the reality is not that simple. Federal budgeting is like a massive jigsaw puzzle, with mandatory spending on Medicare and Social Security already eating up a huge share. If aid funds are paused, the freed-up money doesn't automatically flow into these programs. Instead, political wrangling determines where it goes, And too often, it gets swallowed by debt service or other competing priorities. Meanwhile, seniors and families are left wondering how they'll cope. For a senior living on $1,800 a month in Social Security benefits, even a $20 or $30 increase in monthly Medicare premiums can feel devastating. That's money that could have gone to groceries, utilities, or transportation. For middle-class workers, higher payroll deductions mean less take-home pay at a time when every dollar matters. These aren't abstract policy debates, they're kitchen table issues that shape the daily reality of millions of households. It's worth remembering that Medicare costs don't rise in a vacuum. They're driven by broader healthcare inflation, the rising price of prescription drugs, and an aging population requiring more care. Pausing Ukraine aid won't stop those forces. What it might do, however, is change how Washington handles the budget gap. And if history is any guide, that usually means shifting costs to consumers in the form of higher premiums, deductibles, or reduced benefits. This is why the conversation about Ukraine aid and Medicare is so important right now. It's not just about geopolitics. It's about whether Americans can afford to see a doctor or fill their prescriptions without breaking the bank. It's about whether retirees who worked their entire lives can live with dignity in their golden years. It's about whether future generations will inherit a system that's sustainable or one that collapses under the weight of political gridlock and economic strain. So what can be done? Some experts argue for targeted reforms that shield Medicare from short-term budget battles, creating a more stable funding source that isn't vulnerable to the ups and downs of foreign policy. Others call for expanding Medicare's ability to negotiate drug prices more aggressively, lowering costs for beneficiaries and reducing pressure on the overall system. But whatever the solution, one thing is clear: Americans deserve better than watching their healthcare security become collateral damage in international budget debates. Here's the bottom line. The pause in Ukraine aid may look like a foreign policy decision, but its impact could be felt right here at home, especially for Medicare recipients. Without strong action, the threat of higher premiums will continue to loom, forcing seniors and families to carry the burden of Washington's budget battles. And until leaders confront the twin challenges of global commitments and domestic healthcare inflation, the cycle will keep repeating, leaving ordinary Americans paying the price. Thank you for staying with me through this important discussion. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more deep dives into economic and healthcare policy, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Remember, every policy choice in Washington has a direct impact on your wallet and your well-being. Stay informed, stay prepared, and most of all, keep asking the questions that matter.